What if your dog could sense a life-threatening emergency before anyone else? In the crowded Chicago O'Hare Airport, something unimaginable was about to unfold. Max, a service dog, had always been calm and collected. But today he was different. As Officer Jake Harrison walked through the terminal with Max by his side, the dog's behavior began to change. Max's ears perked up, his eyes locked onto a pregnant woman across the room. Suddenly, he started barking in a way Jake had never heard before, a deep, desperate sound that drew the attention of everyone nearby. Max's body went rigid, his tail stiff, and his barks grew louder, more frantic. The crowd started to notice, and whispers began to spread. Jake, concerned and confused, glanced over at the woman. She seemed unaware of the growing tension in the air, but something was definitely wrong. Max wasn't just barking for attention, he was fixated, sensing something that no one else could see. Jake had worked with Max for years, and this behavior was unlike anything he had experienced. The dog wasn't just acting out. There was a real threat, and Max knew it. "Mom, may I speak with you for a moment?" Jake called out, his voice firm but calm. The woman turned, her face pale, and looked from Max to Jake. She was clearly nervous. "What's going on? Why is your dog acting this way?" she asked. Jake motioned for her to follow him, his heart racing. The tension in the air was thickening as Max continued barking, not backing down. Something serious was unfolding, and Jake was about to find out exactly what. As they walked toward the security office, Max stayed by their side, still growling and scratching at the air. His eyes never left the woman, and his urgency was palpable. The crowd around them grew quiet, sensing something unusual, but the woman, still unaware of the true danger, began to back away. Max was relentless. His behavior was unlike anything Jake had seen. Something wasn't right, and Jake's instincts told him it wasn't just a simple security threat. The woman seemed increasingly alarmed, her hand instinctively resting on her belly, her movements slow, like she could feel something was wrong, but couldn't quite put it into words. Once inside the security office, Jake motioned for the officers to perform a routine check. The woman sat down, visibly shaken, as Max paced in front of the door, still barking and growling with urgency. Every officer in the room could feel the tension building. Jake glanced over at the woman, still trembling. "We're just going to check things out," he reassured her, though his voice was uncertain. Max's behavior was not normal, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something serious was about to happen. Then, in a split second, everything changed. The woman gasped, her face going pale. She pressed her hand to her stomach, her breath shallow. "I don't feel well," she whispered, her voice cracking. The panic in her eyes was unmistakable. Jake's heart raced. He rushed to her side as she collapsed into the chair, her face contorted in pain. Max's barking grew louder, more frantic, as if he knew the danger was only escalating. "Is she in labor?" one of the officers asked, but the woman shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "No, it's too early. Please help me." Jake's stomach dropped. This wasn't just fear or anxiety. This was real. Max had sensed something the others hadn't. The woman wasn't just nervous, she was in medical distress. The realization hit Jake like a ton of bricks. Max had detected the emergency before anyone else, and now there was no time to waste. He shouted to the officers, "We need medical assistance now." As the paramedics rushed to the scene, Jake realized that Max's actions weren't a coincidence. The dog had saved her life. As the paramedics arrived, the urgency in the air intensified. The room seemed to hold its breath. The woman's face was twisted in pain as she clutched her belly, her body trembling with each contraction. Max, who had been so frantic moments ago, was now calm, sitting silently by her side, as if he knew the worst of it was over. But the danger wasn't gone. It was just beginning. The lead paramedic, a seasoned professional, quickly assessed the situation. "She's going into premature labor," he said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "But it's way too early. We need to get her to the hospital, now." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. He had never expected this. The dog wasn't just acting up. It had sensed the life-threatening emergency. Max had saved her life before anyone realized it. "Where's the ambulance?" Jake barked at one of the officers, his mind racing. He looked back at the woman, now pale and sweating with anxiety, her hands gripping her belly tighter. There was no time to waste. The ambulance needed to arrive immediately. The paramedics rushed to help the woman, lifting her carefully into the stretcher. Max stood up, his eyes alert but calm, as if guiding them toward the door. For a brief moment, it felt like the world outside had disappeared, leaving only the gravity of the situation and the unwavering loyalty of a dog who knew what needed to be done. The sirens blared as the ambulance doors slammed shut and the vehicle sped off toward the hospital. Max stood still, his head cocked, watching it disappear into the distance. He had done his job. As the ambulance vanished into the distance, Officer Jake Harrison stood frozen in place, his mind racing to comprehend what had just transpired. The sounds of the busy airport returned to him, but they felt distant, as though he was still trapped in that moment of chaos and uncertainty. His eyes scanned the officers gathered around him, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disbelief. No one had expected this outcome. Not a single person had imagined that Max, of all things, would be the one to detect the life-threatening situation before anyone else. Minutes later, a senior officer approached Jake, his expression serious. "We need to talk about what just happened," he said. Jake nodded, still in a daze, as the officer glanced toward Max, who was now sitting quietly by Jake's side. His eyes were alert, but there was an unmistakable calmness to him, almost as if the storm had passed. The senior officer cleared his throat and looked at the dog. "We've seen animals react to medical emergencies before," he said, "but nothing like this. Max didn't just react to a threat. He sensed it. He saved her life today." Jake stood there, a lump forming in his throat. He had always known Max was special. He'd trusted the dog's instincts countless times, but never like this. The bond they shared went beyond the usual handler and service dog relationship. In that moment, Max had been more than a dog. He had been a protector, an unsung hero who'd prevented a tragedy before it even had a chance to unfold. The realization hit Jake like a wave. Max wasn't just trained to help with specific tasks, he was trained to sense and react to anything, even the unspoken dangers that others couldn't perceive. What had happened wasn't a random outburst or a typical dog's behavior. Max had acted with purpose, driven by a profound understanding of the woman's condition. He had seen the threat before it could be recognized. Days passed, but Officer Jake Harrison couldn't shake the events of that day from his mind. He sat at his desk, looking at the report on his computer screen, but his thoughts were elsewhere, back in the airport with Max. The questions lingered. How had Max known? What exactly had he sensed that no one else could? The woman, Sarah Bennett, had been rushed to the hospital and had stabilized. Thankfully, the doctors had been able to prevent any long-term complications for both her and her premature baby. Sarah had reached out to Jake later that evening, thanking him for his help. But to Jake's surprise, she didn't just thank him for helping her into the ambulance, she thanked him for having Max. "Max saved my life," she had said over the phone, her voice soft and full of gratitude. "I don't know how he knew, but I'm so thankful." Jake didn't have an answer for her then. He still didn't. He had never seen Max react in such a way before, and despite his years of experience with the dog, there were too many things that didn't make sense. As he sat in silence, reflecting on the strange series of events, he recalled something his old canine trainer had once said: "Trust the dog. If they're acting out of the ordinary, there's always a reason." Max had always been reliable, but this time it was something beyond training. Something primal. Jake's phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a message from the senior officer who had spoken to him earlier. "Jake, I've been looking into Max's behavior. There's something unusual going on. I think you might be onto something." Jake's heart skipped a beat. The mystery was far from over. If Max had sensed something as life-altering as a medical emergency, was it possible that there were other instances where animals could detect dangers before they happened? And if so, what did that mean for their training? The answers were still out there, and Jake was determined to find them. But for now, there was one thing he knew for sure. Max had saved a life, and that was something no one could explain away. A few weeks later, Jake found himself back at the airport, standing by the same terminal where everything had started. He was there to debrief, but his mind kept drifting back to Max. The dog was sitting beside him, calm as ever, and Jake was still trying to make sense of what had happened that day. As he walked past the same crowded area where Sarah had stood, he couldn't help but feel a pang of unease. How had Max known about the danger? What if there were more stories like this, stories that people simply didn't notice because they couldn't perceive what the animals could? It wasn't until he received a follow-up call from the medical team at the hospital that the pieces finally began to fit together. The doctor explained that although Sarah's labor was premature, the reason it had escalated so quickly was that she had been silently suffering from an undiagnosed medical condition that could have caused her to go into shock. The stress of the pregnancy, combined with the sudden onset of complications, had triggered her body's response. If she hadn't been rushed to the hospital in time, the consequences could have been dire. It all clicked. Max had not just sensed the labor, he had sensed her body's reaction to the underlying medical issue. The dog had detected something even the doctors had missed until it was too late. Jake felt a sense of awe wash over him. Max, in his quiet way, had been more than just a protector. He had been a warning system, an instinctive lifesaver capable of detecting subtle cues that even trained professionals could miss. That day, standing in the same terminal, Jake realized the full extent of what had transpired. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a partner in a deeper, almost spiritual connection between human and animal. A connection that allowed Max to sense what others could not, to step in when danger loomed, and to act with unflinching loyalty. And in doing so, he had saved a life in a way that words couldn't fully capture. Jake looked down at Max, who wagged his tail slightly, as if acknowledging the unspoken truth between them. In that moment, Jake knew he would never look at his partner the same way again. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a hero. As the days passed, Jake couldn't stop thinking about Max's instincts. The more he reflected on the events, the more he realized that Max's behavior was not just a stroke of luck. It was a profound testament to the depth of the bond between humans and animals. Max had known something. He had sensed a danger that Jake, the woman, and even the medical team couldn't see until it was almost too late. The more Jake learned about service dogs and the advanced training they undergo, the more he understood that there was a lot about animal behavior that went beyond simple commands. Max's training was beyond the basics of guiding and assisting. His instincts were finely tuned to detect changes in the environment, from subtle shifts in body language to even deeper physiological cues. But what still troubled Jake was the underlying question. How did Max know? How had he detected Sarah's medical emergency when no one else could? It wasn't just a matter of reacting to her distress. Max had acted with intention, with focus, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. Was it something inherent in all animals, or was Max uniquely gifted? Jake spoke with a behavioral expert, someone who had spent years studying canine instincts. She explained that there were documented cases of dogs reacting to medical emergencies, dogs who could sense epileptic seizures before they occurred, or dogs who could detect cancer cells in their owners' bodies. The expert hypothesized that Max might have picked up on a combination of physical and emotional cues, things that, as humans, we simply couldn't notice. Animals are deeply attuned to our subtle changes, the expert explained. Their senses are far more advanced than ours. Dogs especially can sense changes in heart rate, body temperature, and even the release of certain hormones. It's likely that Max felt something in her that no one else could. Jake listened carefully, piecing together all that he had learned. Max's alertness to Sarah's condition wasn't a random act. It was an instinctive response, one that had saved her life. From that day forward, Jake made it his mission to learn more, to dive deeper into understanding the true capabilities of his canine partner. He began exploring new ways to train and harness Max's remarkable instincts. What if there were more people, more lives that could be saved by simply trusting in the deep, unseen connection between humans and animals? In the end, Jake's respect for Max and for all service dogs grew immeasurably. Max had shown him something far more powerful than obedience or skill. He had revealed a world where animals could not only assist us, but protect us in ways we could never fully understand. And with that realization, Jake knew that there was so much more to Max than anyone had ever imagined. Weeks turned into months, but the memory of that fateful day at Chicago O'Hare Airport stayed with Jake. Max had become more than just his service dog. He had become his partner in ways Jake never thought possible. The bond they shared deepened, and Jake found himself relying on Max not just for his usual tasks, but for something far greater: intuition. Jake started paying closer attention to Max's behavior, observing the subtle signs that would go unnoticed by others. Max's ears would perk up at the faintest shift in the air, his eyes scanning the crowd, always alert. It wasn't just about knowing when someone was nearby or when they were in distress. It was something deeper. Max had developed a sort of sixth sense, a powerful instinct that allowed him to detect hidden dangers long before they became obvious. The realization of this didn't just affect Jake's work with Max. It changed how he viewed his role as a handler. No longer was he simply responsible for ensuring Max's well-being or guiding him through daily tasks. Now he saw himself as a conduit between Max and the world, a bridge between the unspoken understanding that Max possessed and the humans who needed protection. Jake began training Max even further, using his new insights to sharpen their bond. He didn't just want Max to respond to commands, he wanted to enhance Max's ability to sense, to react, and to protect. Together they became a team that was not only prepared for any situation, but attuned to the unseen. It wasn't long before Jake and Max's unique partnership caught the attention of others. A local news station, intrigued by the incredible story of Max's life-saving instinct, reached out for an interview. Jake was hesitant at first, but as he stood in front of the camera, explaining the bond he shared with Max, he realized how important it was to share their story. "Max isn't just a dog," Jake said during the interview, his voice steady. "He's a protector, a guardian, someone who sees beyond what we can see. He's saved lives, and he's taught me more than I could ever imagine about trust, loyalty, and the power of instinct." Jake's words resonated with viewers across the country. People were moved by the story, and many reached out to learn more about how service dogs like Max could detect dangers and assist in ways previously thought impossible. The story sparked conversations, raised awareness, and helped countless people realize the extraordinary potential of animals. And as for Jake, the experience forever changed his perspective on life. He had always known Max was special, but now he understood just how profound the connection between humans and animals could be. Max's instincts had not only saved Sarah's life, they had opened Jake's eyes to a world of possibilities where loyalty, love, and intuition bridged the gap between species in ways that could never be explained by science alone. Jake and Max's story had a lasting impact, not only on their lives, but on the lives of everyone who heard it. The bond they shared was more than just a partnership. It was a reminder of the incredible abilities animals have to sense, protect, and love in ways that go beyond our understanding. Through Max's bravery, Jake learned that sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones that don't need words to be understood. Max's story is just one example of the incredible power that animals hold. If you were moved by Max's instincts and the bond he shared with Jake, imagine what more animals can do if given the chance. This story shows that we can never truly understand all the ways animals help us, but we can always learn to trust them more. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share it with friends and family who need to hear it. Together, we can spread awareness of the amazing potential of animals and help inspire a world where their instincts are respected and embraced. Make sure to like this video if you believe in the power of animals and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories of bravery, loyalty, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Let's continue to explore the extraordinary ways animals touch our lives. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories coming soon.